All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College EWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course, I've been creating a series of video presentations that are based on the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. I'm in the JavaScript portion, and we're talking about JavaScript building blocks, and it's time to go over functions. Functions are basically, they're a reusable piece of code that ideally do a single task. Now, the author says it allows you to store a piece of code that does a single task inside of a defined block. That's true. So you can call it whenever you need it. That's known as invoking the function. JavaScript is, as it says, you'll find them everywhere. There are built-in functions in JavaScript. You can use your own functions in JavaScript as well. So here's a couple of examples. Console.log, where you log something onto the console, that's a function. Replace, where you replace every instance of the word string with the word sausage, that's an example. Now, sometimes you will hear the words function and method used interchangeably. For now, at least, don't let that bother you one way or the other. Okay? When you call a function, it's known as invoking a function. All right, now they're going to talk about functions versus methods here. Before we do that, let's look at a quick little program example that I'll write. And, with these, I'm not even testing these. They should work, but I'm not even going to test them. So let's see. Let's write a very, very, very simple little calculator program. Okay, so we'll do something like this. Let's see. Let number 1 equal parseInt prompt, please enter a number. And we'll just default it to the number 10. All right. And let's see. We'll do it again. And we'll have number 2. So we'll say, please enter a number, and then we'll say, please enter another number. All right. Now, you know this as well as I do. We're expecting here that the person running the program will be smart enough to put in a number. What if they're not? All right. I could come in here and do this. I could say while is not a number 1. All right, and I could just force them, and there's nothing at all wrong with this. So I could do this and just ask them to enter it again. All right, so eventually they're going to, hopefully at least, fall out of this loop, and now they've put a number in. All right, and we could do the same thing with number 2. All right, let's just make this, please enter a number and please enter a number. That's fine. So by the time we get down to here, we've now, so let's put in this. So validate that number 1 was numeric, because that's what this is doing. And down here, we're validating that number 2 was numeric. All right. Then we're going to come in here, we're going to say this. We'll call this choice, and I'll say let choice equal, I don't even like doing it like this. Let's see. Let's just create a string up at the top here. We'll just call it str for string, equal, enter a 1 to add the numbers, \n, which means I want to put this on a new line, and I'm just going to keep adding to this string right here. Enter a 2 to subtract number 2 from number 1. To add n1 plus n2. So a 2 to subtract, so n1 minus n2. So that's to add n1 plus n2. That's subtract n1 minus n2. All right, let's just keep going. Enter a 3 to multiply n1 times n2. Enter a 4 to divide n1 divided by number 2, and enter a 5 to modulo. So n1 like that. All right. So all right, and I'm going to change every instance in here of number 1 just to n1. And I'm going to change my number 2 to n2. A little easier to read, that's all. All right, so what should happen here after I've got values for each one of these is I should be able to say let choice equal. So this is going to now say all this. Enter this, enter this, enter this. Equal prompt. I'm going to prompt, and I can do another parse equal parse int prompt, and now my prompt, I'm just going to put str in there. All right, so that's going to say enter a 1 to add, enter a 2 to subtract, enter a 3. You get the idea. All right, and I'm expecting them to enter a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or a 5. Make sense? All right, so I can come in here and say if choice not equal 1 and choice not equal 2 and choice not equal 3. Let's put this, then let's continue on a new line here. And choice not equal 4 and choice not equal 5, meaning they put in something invalid there. All right. Well, I'll just ask them to do it again. Okay, so this is doing what? This will be doing a validate choice was a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. All right, so what do we have in here so far? This is our message. Here we're asking them to put in values. Here we're validating the values they put in. Here we're asking them to make a choice, and we're validating that choice. All right, so when we get down to here, we'll do this. We'll do a switch. So let's say that we're going to call this, we're going to put this into its own function, and we're going to call this function main. All right, doesn't have to be called main, but a lot of programming languages, when you start a program, the first thing that you call is something called main. That's why I'm calling mine main here. All right, so I'm going to come in here now and I'm going to say switch on choice. All right, and if they entered a 1, So case 1, I'm going to call add 2. And I'm going to pass into that N1 and N2. And break. All right. If they did a 2, I'm going to call subtract 2. And pass in N1 and N2. Oops. So 1 is add, 2, that should be subtract. If it's a 3, we're going to call multiply 2. And do that. If it's a 4, we're going to call divide 2. And if it's a 5, we're going to call modulo 2. All right. Now, should have to be those, but if it's a default, all I'm going to do is just break. There's nothing to do because I haven't put in a valid action. All right. So why am I showing you this? Because now I'm done with main, and now I'm going to write my other functions. So main right here is the function that would be called when the program would start running. It's going to ask me to enter a number and then enter another number. If the first number that we entered was not numeric, it's going to ask me to do it again and again and again and again and again. Probably would have been a little cleaner to have taken and done it like this. And actually validate that right here. And then come in here and done my let and done that one. There's other ways of doing this. I'm just showing you a couple things here. All right. So then we've got our choice. What I want to show you though is this. Now I'm going to write those other functions. So function add 2. We're passing in N1 and N2. We don't even have to call them the same thing, but we can. So I'm going to return N1 plus N2. And that's it. That's my whole add 2 function. So let's grab this. And we'll write each one of these. So we'll have subtract 2. And that'll return N1 minus N2. We'll have multiply 2. And that will return N1 times N2. We'll have divide 2. Which will return N1 divided by N2. And we'll have modulo 2. Which will return N1 modulo N2. So you see what we've started to do here. We have taken all of that logic and put each one of those into their own function. Could we do even more with this? Yeah. All right. For instance, where we've got this let N1 equal parse here, we could take this code and put it into its own function. We could take this code and put it into its own function, if indeed that was something we wanted to do. We also could take this code and put it into its own function, and we could take this code and put it into its own function. All right, so what I'm trying to show you here is programmers, as it says, they call functions. Now, it says if those functions exist inside of objects, then they're called methods rather than being called functions. You don't need to care about that now because we don't talk about objects for a while yet. So just worry about functions. All right. So back on the program that I just gave you, this is a function invocation. It is calling add 2 and it's passing N1 and N2. These N1 and N2s are that N1 and that N2. These are called actual parameters because that's their actual name. Inside of here, these are called formal parameters. We could have just called them A, and B. And then I would have had to return A plus B. Could have done that, and it would have worked exactly the same way. It would have been fine. So in other words, these formal parameters do not have to be the real name. These actual parameters do have to be the real name. All right, just kind of keep that in mind here as we're going on. All right, good time to break right here because we're going to talk about anonymous functions. And it's changing gears a little bit. So I'll come back to talk about anonymous functions in just a couple minutes.